It's an At the Office edition of the East Bank Sports Show, serving up the hottest sports takes from right here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's your hosts, Noah, John, and Eric.
Back in to another office edition of the East Bank Sports Show. Hope you enjoyed the new intro. Eric, shout out to you for that intro because that video was fantastic. We got another one coming up for the regular live show that me and Matt do every Sunday. How are we feeling? College basketball is over. Me and Eric got to go check out what were we calling it? Wasn't it the Tourney Village or something like that? Tourney Town? Over at the Huntington Convention Center. That was fun. What were your thoughts on that, man? John, what's up to you too, by the way? I'm not trying to exclude you right now.
No, it's good. I appreciate you guys sharing the video. Free throws are harder than they look, right, Jen?
Oh, man. Shots fired. First of all, this guy bailed on us, and he's going to fire shots now. But no, it was awesome, Noah. I mean, like we said in the last episode, we talked just how much Cleveland shines when we do these events. And it was on full display. Tourney Town was amazing. You can feel the energy in the city over the weekend. I was actually driving today and I was kind of sad. I drove past the convention center and I was thinking, this really sucks that it's all over. Because you could feel that, everything through Monday being the eclipse and opening day. But yeah, everything was incredible. I really enjoyed the time, and the women's final was amazing.
Yeah, and I would say it was honestly better than the men's. I watched more of the women's than I did the men's. I mean, I know you're like a second, third team is UConn, so you're happy about how the men's turned out. I love Dawn Staley, so I'm glad South Carolina won, as much as, we've already talked about Iowa and the implications and everything going on with Caitlin Clark. We got a good basketball game. It was the second most viewed women's sporting event since like the 2015 or 2017. I forget what odd number year it was. Women's soccer World Cup final. So that's all fine and dandy. I just wanted to
our city looks great. We put on a show. Like you hear millions of people who aren't Clevelanders might be in Cleveland, and you start thinking weather and what could go wrong. It was like 7 degrees, sunny. The eclipse was great. The basketball was great. People showed up and showed out. So, it was a good look for us too.
Yeah, it was a fantastic weekend in Cleveland. And it's a fantastic Tuesday night to debate all of the AFC North coaches. So for everybody watching right now or listening in after the fact, I wrote an article for Fans First Sports, which is a part of the network, the East Bank Sports Show and the Fanatical Elves Network. We're all a part of that. I wrote an article kind of giving Kevin Stefanski this report card on what I thought he's done in his first 4 years as a head coach. I wanted to go through those criteria with these two because it sounds like a perfect office debate, breaking it down like this, kind of see what our thoughts are, our grades are on Stefanski, and then I'll go into what I said in the article, which is obviously also my opinion. And then we're gonna divulge a little bit. We're gonna go over the Steelers. We're gonna go talk about all 4 of the coaches in the AFC North. But we should have a fun little show here tonight. We started a little bit earlier, or a little bit later. I'm sorry about that. Than we planned. John had a meeting he ran over. No big deal. But we're all here now. Let's get into Kevin Stefanski. Eric, let's get these grades going. Give me your whole kind of take, what you're thinking. Let's get after it.
Yeah. So first, let me start by saying that I do not like giving a letter grade. I think it's so arbitrary, but I give Kevin Stefanski a B-. And first of all, we haven't seen enough from him, right? He's still a fairly new head coach. There's been a lot of roster changes. He's a little over 500 right now. He's sitting at, I think it's 37-30. That does include a playoff win against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't want to not mention that because that was a glorious moment. And what he did this past year is more than commendable. Listen, I know we had an early playoff loss against the Texans, who, by the way, had the NFL Coach of the Year runner-up in DeMeco Ryans. But he took a squad that was absolutely demoralized when Chubb went down. And then we had how many starting quarterbacks. We were setting records in starting quarterbacks. We got the last ounces of life out of an aging Joe Flacco. I mean, what he did in this year was absolutely incredible. That said, where the B minus part comes in, there are some things that I don't completely agree with and don't add up for me when it comes to Stefanski. His play calling in particular, I think sometimes he doesn't necessarily scheme to the players he has. I think he's a very, very good offensive mind and coach, but I think he gets lost in that sometimes, and we see that on the field. He doesn't manage very well at times. I think that's, again, because he's over involved in the offense. We see it when he'll have an incredible opening drive or series or two, and then it kind of falls off. Those in-game adjustments aren't necessarily there. My biggest issue is that, and this is a silly one, he's so stoic on the sideline. I want some fire. I want some passion. I want him yelling a little bit. I don't like when things aren't going well. We have a 3 and out and the camera pans to Kevin, and it's like Kitchens all over again with the Denny's menu, just standing there like he looks lost. I'm not saying he is. I think he's a great coach, and I think that there's nobody else out there that I'd really want to see on the sideline right now. There are guys that I'm a big fan of in the NFL. Andy Reid comes to mind first, D'Amico, but I'm really happy with Stefanski, and I think that coaching stability is absolutely the key to success in this league. And I want to see him around for a long time. I like the extensions, the talks around extending Kevin, but the play calling and looking lost on the sidelines, those are the things that they don't sit well with me at times.
Yeah,
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with a lot there and have some additional thoughts. Overall, I think Stefanski is a good fit. He's just what the doctor ordered. When I sit down to think about evaluations, you give letter grades. I agree with you, Eric. It's kind of a funny exercise and tough to do at times because we don't know what we don't know about the future, and I think you have to judge somebody on their whole body of work. But you can give a letter grade by thinking about how they performed against expectations, right? All coaches are not created equal. All teams are not created equal, and different coaches come into different situations with different agendas and different goals. Somebody coming in off of a team that doesn't have a quarterback with no talent, that is struggling to win games, doesn't have the same expectations as someone in, say, the Baltimore Ravens franchise, where they're a little bit more used to winning. I give Stefanski overall an A-. When we think about what he came here to do, and when we think about the status of the franchise since they came back in 99, any coach that's a perennial playoff contender who has playoff wins, who has a winning record, and he's been here for more than 2/3 of a season, I think is in the top 10% of Browns coaches right off the bat. And when you think about what you could expect as a Browns fan, I think he's answered the call. If I told you before the season that Deshaun Watson still wasn't going to play consistently well or consistently, period, and that we were going to go through 4 quarterbacks and Nick Chubb was going to blow out a knee and that we'd rotate offensive linemen like it was our job for that record and for a playoff appearance in a highly competitive AFC and probably the toughest division in the NFL, I don't know how you really knock the guy. I mean, when you look back at the last season and the last 4 seasons, where do you say I expected Kevin Stefanski to be so much better than what he is now? The only reason I gave him an A- instead of an A+ is the play calling. It's one of those things where I think we go 90% of the time, right? If you get 100 play calls, let's say per game, I think he does really well on 95. And then once or twice a Sunday, I look at my wife or my family or whoever I'm watching the game with, and I go, it's 2nd and 1 in the 4th quarter. We're down 2. Don't get too cute. And we run a double reverse with a pass and an option. And I'm like, you needed 3 feet. Like, what are we doing? Somebody throws an interception. The ball gets fumbled. So I think his play calling may have actually cost us a game or 2 this year, not because it was putrid overall. I think there was those moments where it was like, game's on the line. It's winning time. We need 2 yards. Like, let's not get silly. And we got silly and we paid for it.
Can I just jump in real quick, John?
Yeah,
Because I am a big believer, and I mean big believer. 2nd and 2, you always do play action and take a shot down the field because you have the first down. You always go for a long shot there, and then you turn around and hand the ball off on 3rd down.
maybe. And I'll have to go back and look because I have some specifics in mind, but not if there's 2 minutes and 8 seconds left in the game, you're down 2 and you're knocking on field goal range. You don't. You take the yardage.
Fair.
You know what I mean? And I'm with you. First quarter, or you have a big lead, why not? Let it fly. But the other thing that I would say is let it fly with your playmakers, right? Like if you got a wide receiver making a throw, or you count on somebody to catch a toss. It's just high risk, low reward when you have so little to accomplish. But like I said, I'm nitpicking. It's not even whole games. It's specific situations. But overall, yeah, I'd give him an A minus. I think he's done a really nice job with the play calling being really the only area where I think he has some room to improve.
So I find it really funny that you gave him an A minus. Now, for anybody watching at home, and I know you two know, I am the biggest Kevin Stefanski fanboy I think there is out there, at least in the East Side, in the East Bank of the Flats in Cleveland, right? I gave his overall right now a B. I think there's a lot of good there, right? I think there's a lot of good there. 2-time coach of the year, 2 playoff berths in 4 years. And, you both have mentioned some of the injury history and stuff that we have dealt with throughout the years. Baker deciding if he wants to play through the shoulder and all that. I'm thinking of the whole body of work right now. I also went down and I broke through some of the other categories and gave him grades. So, like, for example, I gave his media presence a C+ because him and Andrew Berry are notorious for keeping their cards like this, which is fine. But sometimes that's frustrating to us as fans when, we're in the Muni lot on a Sunday and then we find out DTR is starting against the Ravens and you paid $150 for a ticket. I wonder what happened there anyway. And then I go down and I break it to, his leadership, for example, and I give it a B-. And I want to go back to Eric's point about how Kevin Stefanski can seem to be not fiery because he's got his, Denny's menu, as us Cleveland fans, for whatever reason, have coined calling it the Denny's menu, even though it's a play sheet. And I gave him a B- there because a lot of what you saw out of Stefanski this past year, I thought was fantastic in terms of being fiery in the locker room after games, win the week, 1-0, 1-0, as opposed to thinking about the bigger picture, just win the week. Those are some of the things that I really liked out of Kevin Stefanski for the leadership side of everything that we've seen out of him so far. And I could only see that getting better as he gets more and more comfortable and more used to being a head coach. I mean, this is his first head coaching job. He's 4 years in. He has 2 coach of the year titles.
Now, really quick on that one point, I wanted to jump in. I think we have an agreement and an alignment on your assessment of those things. Where I fundamentally disagree is that plays into what a head coach needs to be graded on. When you look around the league at some of the other head coaches that were excellent, like, find me one Belichick press conference that was good. One.
And that's fair too. And I agree.
You know what I mean? And the fire and the passion and some of that stuff too. The players kind of like him. Maybe he does it behind the scenes, but I felt like that was more like appeasement to the fans and how we view him. But if this guy can take us to the playoffs and win Super Bowls and his press conferences are duds, like, sign me up for that yesterday.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. The key there you just said is winning Super Bowls. We'd trade off. I mean, we'd take a mute if he won a Super Bowls. And I will say,
exactly.
After every Browns game, they normally post on YouTube Stefanski handing out the game ball. And he always does seem like a very charismatic leader in that locker room. So you're absolutely right. It's coming from the fan perspective, but sometimes you want to see that passion. It goes back to, maybe we get a bad call. If he's fired up, it gets the fans fired up. It fires up the players. I don't know. Maybe he's just not that guy. I just want to see a little more of that, a little more expression.
Little inside thing. We my oldest daughter works at a pizza place in Lakewood that shall remain nameless. And Friday night is Stefanski family pizza night during the season. He always comes in with $100 bill and puts it in the tip jar. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on the behind the scenes what we do and don't know, because he seems like he's generally a good guy too. I don't know if that's here or there, but fun story.
Well,
I love the
you bring
story.
it up. I challenge Kevin Stefanski to leave $200 next time.
That's
no, but
crazy.
I love that. That's great.
That's crazy. No, back to my little spiel real quick. And I think you guys might disagree with me on this one. I gave his play calling a B. And honestly, thinking back on it, I'd even go up to a B plus, A minus. I think his play calling gets a lot of hate for no reason. I think a lot of the times, he gets cute on plays and he does the trick play or something like that. And because it doesn't work out, we all get upset. But then you think back to some of those trick plays, like when we'd throw to Jarvis and Jarvis would throw it down the field, back in the 2021, 2020 seasons. And we were all ecstatic and thought it was fantastic just because some of those plays don't work now, whether it be, doing an Elijah Moore end around, which I think never netted a positive yard in the entire last season. But if Elijah Moore busts it for a touchdown, then we're all like, Kevin Stefanski's a genius. It's one of those neither here nor there things. And I think he calls a really good game, especially I think he's going to call a really good game moving into an even more modern offense this year. I want to know real quick before we, keep churning and burning here, what would you guys give him letter grade wise play calling?
C. It's hard, man. This is why the letter grade is tough. I think he does a great job 95% of the time. And I think those 3 plays a game that are head scratchers cost us big time. I also think that he is too strong-willed and stubborn to change play calling based on personnel. Like, I'm watching guys who played in the XFL come in and throw the ball 60 times in a game or 52 times in a game. And I'm like, that was the game plan, right? Like, you got PJ in there and you're like, okay, we're going to rally. And he played well. You know, San Francisco, he got the win. But, like, bro, you got to mix it up a little bit based on who you have. And I think between that and then that one cute end around when we just need 2 yards, that's the kind of stuff that in critical moments makes it outsized impact, even though it's only a few plays per game.
And my rebuttal to that real quick, and then Eric, you can go ahead and give a grade, is what about, I think we say that kind of thing and we're like, why did PJ Walker throw X amount of times? Because I don't know, exact numbers and stats. I'm just going with the hypothetical here. But a lot of those games, I feel like we played down, we were coming from behind. So you have to throw more in the NFL. I think a lot of times he gets the flack for the hindsight when you're like, damn, PJ Walker threw 48 times against the Seahawks or whatever. And then you look back at it and you're either playing a close game with no Nick Chubb or, you're playing from behind and you can't really get the run game going. So you have to throw the ball. I think a lot of the time you get back to that and he gets a lot of flack for something that, as an analytic football team, because we're a very analytics driven front office and coaching staff, it's like 85% of the time they should be throwing the ball in this situation or whatever. That's just me. Eric, what would you grade him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably around that B minus C mark. No, I would say firmly B minus. I think John's right. I think that the scheming sometimes it doesn't seem to be there. You see that he really excels with a pro style quarterback offense. Joe Flacco comes in and it's like not missing a beat. And I think part of that is that's where Stefanski was comfortable. He was, calling the offense for Kirk Cousins for years. I think he likes that style. And I think that John's absolutely right. The cutesy stuff, it's easy to say, Noah, that had that worked, it would have been a genius move. Well, sure, going for it on 4th and 1 from your own 20, if it works, you look like a genius. But when it doesn't work, you have to be held accountable to those plays. And there's times where it feels like he gets lost in the game a little bit, like the game's passing him by a bit. And like we said, this is getting really nitpicky because overall, I do think he's a really good coach. I don't think head coaches should be calling every play on every down either. I think your
With you on that too.
responsibility as a head coach, it's bigger than that. And the fact that he has taken over offensive play calling, he needs to own that, or he's been the guy. He needs to own that. Yeah, the end around stuff, the cutesy stuff, it's like we just get in our own way sometimes. And when it stalls a drive, when you go out there and you do go 3 and out, or it's 3 straight throws that are incompletions, you just go, okay, what are we doing, right? I think he gets lost in that flow at times. Now that's to say, you're right, John, that I think some of those play calls have lost us games, but the vast majority of the time, that's not the case. I think that the calls kind of align with what should happen. And as a fan, it's so redeeming when you go, okay, I would do this on 3rd and 4, and then they do it and they succeed.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. But yeah, he's got to be held accountable for those missed calls. And he's got to lead. I don't want to see him play calling, frankly.
And I'll pile one more on, though. I know you want to move us along, but here's the other thing I'm talking about with situations and specific moments of high intensity. When we got to the playoffs, Stefanski ran the same stuff. And when they talked to the Texans after the game, the defense said that was the easiest game we ever played because we knew what was coming. I don't know if you saw some of those comments, but you're in the playoffs, right? In all sports, basketball, you got playoff LeBron and people turn it up a notch. In baseball, they're going down to every single pitch to do a matchup on hot zone, cold zone, what hitters hit the ball where, because when the playoffs are there, the magnifying glass is out and everything's times 1,000. Stefanski kind of said, hey, it's been working all season. I'm going to roll it out there. I mean, yes, those were bad passes by Flacco, but those back-to-back picks and some of that stuff, like, where's the innovation? Where's the chess match? Where's the strategy? We get into the doldrums of a 17-week season, looks pretty good week to week with a couple hiccups, and then somebody's game planning for you because the season's on the line. He wasn't up to the task. I think he would take as big a piece of ownership for that loss as anybody. And I think the play calling was vanilla, predictable. There were no wrinkles, and I think we paid a price for it when you see it in the final score.
But you know what? I do think that you got to keep it in perspective because we came from a guy like Freddie Kitchens, who I swear Freddie was like a bad gambler. Like, red's going to hit next, and he just kept doubling down on it. So, coming from that to this, and I know it, I know comparing coaches to coaches is often not a great idea, but my point is we have come so far in our offense. And again, last year is an example of he wasn't working with a whole lot. I mean, our team was held together with popsicle sticks and Band-Aids, and he managed to field a playoff team and lose. I think the Texans are on the rise. I mean, he lost to a really good team. And I don't think that necessarily came down to play calling.
Yeah. The Texans looked on the rise against us and then not so on the rise in Baltimore the very next week. And that you took the words out of my mouth too. I was going to say, if the question is Kevin Stefanski a better play caller than Freddie Kitchens? I think we have alignment. I'm comparing him to expectations and to what other people in the division in the league do. I see opportunity for improvement.
And I agree with you on that too. I'm also, as much as I am a Kevin Stefanski fan, I'm also a big proponent of the head coach shouldn't call plays. But that's also part of the reason you bring Kevin Stefanski in is because he's such a big offensive mind and he can call plays really well. Supposedly, this is, what they were saying when we signed him back in 2020 to be the head coach of the Browns. So to me, it's like you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place because you want to let him call plays because that's what he's good at. Supposedly, again, I think he's pretty good at calling plays through and through. Or, delegating to whoever your OC is. And I think there's a lot more opportunity for it now, but not when Alex Van Pelt was here. So I'm going to cut us to commercial real quick, and then we're going to come in and talk. Well, I'll lead it in after the break. So we are back, and I thank you guys real quick for listening to those commercials. I want to shout out everybody at Fans First Sports Network, as well as the Fanatical Elves, and let you guys know if you hit download on, your Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to your podcast, it's really helpful. It helps us continue to grow and network, and, also try to make some side change on this. I really appreciate it. Shout out everybody back at the network. That being said, this topic that we're about to get into, as we all kind of start smiling and getting giddy and all that, is kind of the reason this branch show started, I feel like. And honestly, my friendship with these two, I think, started when I first got into my job at Channel 19. It was a debate about a guy that has kind of had our number as Browns fans for years and years and years. And I think he's overrated. John thinks he's one of the greatest of all time.
That is not true.
Eric thinks, he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Mike Tomlin is overrated. Agree or disagree? I have been waiting to put this one on paper with Mike's in hand and talking about it live.
I have
John?
no idea how Mike Tomlin could be considered overrated. None. The guy has been to the Super Bowl twice. He's won a Super Bowl. And when you look at the rosters and the talent that he's given, he's consistently exceeded expectations. We were just talking about Stefanski. What's the expectation? Who expected the Steelers to be a 500 team in like any of the last 3 years? Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, like the list of quarterbacks that this guy has had that he's gotten to 8 and 9 wins and 10 wins is unbelievable. I hate the Steelers because I'm a Browns fan, but when you take an objective look at it and say, okay, body of work, if they were just, insert blank team here, they're almost the kind of team you want to root for. I mean, they got this underdog mentality. They play nasty defense. They got one of the best defensive players in the league. They're always prepared. They always have all of their personnel getting the most out of their potential. And the guy has gone to Super Bowls and won a Super Bowl. I don't know who outside of Andy Reid you put in a category of active coaches where you go, hey, Mike Tomlin is definitely worse than this guy. If you're starting a team, I don't know how many coaches I would take ahead of him. I don't know how he could be overrated because he's one of the best active coaches in the league. He's never had a losing season.
I'm going to go in first, Eric, because this is very much a John and Noah debate. And then Eric joined, and then a friendship brewed from there. Mike Tomlin's overrated, in my opinion, for a plethora of reasons, right? Yes, I acknowledge the Super Bowls and he was there, but he was there as an assistant coach and then got up there. Those teams weren't exactly under his leadership for the whole, build up to the Super Bowl. I'll push that to the side because at the end of the day, a Super Bowl win's a Super Bowl win, instead of, saying that it wasn't his Super Bowl. Like I would throw at you in the office and try to, stir the pot or whatever. I will say my biggest gripe with Mike Tomlin, aside from anything else, is having those teams when, Ben was damn near his prime. Antonio Brown didn't have CTE and was tweeting about CTESPN every day. And Le'Veon Bell was Le'Veon Bell and wasn't on OnlyFans. Eric, shout out to you for knowing about that.
I forgot until you reminded me. Got to make your money, I guess.
They didn't even make a Super Bowl with those teams is absurd to me. I think it shows a lapse in, I don't want to say coaching. It's hard for me, right? Because I do recognize Mike Tomlin as this coach that, has won, consistently had winning seasons, no matter what in the regular season. But what does that matter when you go and get first round bounced all the time? You have a fantastic team in front of you in the Killer Bees era of the Steelers, and you do nothing with it. You don't get anything out of it. And I know what your rebuttal is going to be. Tom Brady was there. That's fantastic. Eli Manning beat Tom Brady twice.
That's it. I mean, that is an interesting way of looking at that. I don't. Yeah, I mean, shout out to Eli Manning. The Giants had their number.
First of
They
all, it
don't
was the
get one
Patriots
and done
defense
bounced.
that let them down, but go on.
Yeah,
100%.
they don't get one and done bounced. And I know the Killer Bees, it was a good team. It was a really good team. But when you run up against a juggernaut, only one team can win the Super Bowl every year. So to make an AFC championship appearance and lose, and to make an AFC championship appearance and win and lose the Super Bowl, we're saying it like those are, oh, well, you had a good team and you didn't win a championship. So if that's the line of thinking, there are no good coaches in the NFL, including Belichick. I mean, when we bring Belichick back into it, how many Super Bowls did he lose with Tom Brady? 3? So I guess he was a bad coach too. And how could you have all this talent because you lost in a really big game? Like you went 16-0 and lost a football game. Like he must be awful, right?
Mike Tomlin to me, Eric, I'm sorry. I know you probably want to get some words in here, so I'm going to let you go after I do this. I promise. Mike Tomlin to me is the master of doing more with less, but less with more. And that doesn't equate to being a fantastic coach to me. Just because you can get some guys like Kenny Pickett, who is god-awful, even though all the Steeler fanboys on Twitter thought Kenny Pickett was going to be the MVP or something this year, and now he's in Philly as like the third stringer. That's all fine and dandy. I love that. That's great. That's good for him that they got. I don't love that as a Browns fan. I'm going to rewind for a second. That's all fine and dandy that he can go do that. That's great for him. I'm glad. But when you have rosters that should be making it through the upper echelon and winning a championship and getting a ring, you've done nothing playoff-wise in years. You've done nothing in terms of the regular season other than 9-8, 10-7 sometimes in years. If you're that good of a coach, in my opinion, and you're this glorified, he's great, he's fantastic. I need to see more. I get the front-loaded body of work, but he's been there for how many years? Do you guys know off the top of your head? I didn't have that in my articles.
I want to say 15 or 16.
I mean, it's been a decade almost. We're coming up on a decade of, nothing.
More, yeah.
Yeah, but with who at quarterback and with what to do it with.
If he's so good, why can't it?
If he's so good, I know Eric's got to talk. What I want to come back to then, if Mike Tomlin is overrated, right? I said Mike Tomlin is probably the second or third best coach in the NFL right now. And you're saying he's overrated. I would like to know who out there would do better than him with what he had. And when your list, which it will be, is 3 coaches, one of which isn't even in the league anymore, that's exactly where he should be rated. But go, Eric, you go. You come back.
And I should say this is kind of how exactly the arguments went in the office.
100%. Me and John were cubicle buddies, and me were pointing. Anyway, Eric, go ahead.
You two are on the extreme, and I initially thought that I was somewhere in between the middle of you two, but I'm not. I'm firmly on John's side here because, hear me out. First of all, do you think Dan Marino's overrated? He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. He never won a Super Bowl. Manning is an incredible player who won 2 Super Bowls, one of which the defense carried him. My point is, it's not easy to win in this league. There's a lot of parity. And sure, I get what you're saying. Those rosters were insane. In 2017, they finished 13-3, and they had Big Ben, they had Le'Veon, they had Antonio Brown, Juju, but games aren't won on paper. And by the way, in that game that they did lose against the Jaguars, they still put up 42 points on offense. So I'm just not sure what you're asking for at that point from a coach. Sometimes it's just not your day. The year before that, they lost to the Super Bowl winning Patriots in the AFC Championship. And the year before that, they lost to the Super Bowl winning Broncos. I believe that was the divisional round. Mm-hmm. What says more about Tomlin for me, it's twofold. It's exactly what you guys were saying. He gets more out of these terrible squads. They had no right being in the playoffs this year. They had no right being there in 21 by the way, they lost to the Chiefs. Tomlin's never had a losing season. His win percentage puts him 10th best among coaches with at least 100 games coached. It's a 633 win percentage. That's above Sean Payton. That's above John Harbaugh. That's above a lot of really great coach names. And, frankly, I think one of the biggest things when it comes to coaching is the leadership. And Tomlin is a leader of men. That's never been a question. Think of the personalities that he's had to manage over the years. Those names that I just listed off, and very not often, maybe Le'Veon Bell's the exception. Not often did you have issues arising from these big names. He leads his men into battle week after week. Listen, I hate the Steelers. I think their fan base is delusional, but Mike Tomlin is by far one of the best coaches in the NFL, period. And John makes the perfect point. Who do you replace him with? If the bar is a Super Bowl and the bar is to keep winning, first of all, Pittsburgh wins. Browns fans should know more than anybody, though, a franchise quarterback doesn't just grow on a tree. So I get it. They missed some of the years. By the way, he did win a Super Bowl with the Steelers. He did go to another 2. Did he lose 2?
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to win. I just, for where my money's at, he's one of the best coaches. And when there's talk of replacing him, my first thing is who, and the second thing is, you're not going to find much better out there to lead a group of men.
Yeah. And the other couple things I wanted to throw in too, off the field and outside of the coaching, right? We talked a little bit about this, not to take it too far in another direction, but the Rooney family implemented the Rooney rule and hired Mike Tomlin as kind of the prototype for that entire thing. Black coaches are still underrepresented in the league that has as many black athletes as the NFL has. They've moved meaningfully and demonstratively in the right direction since then, but Tomlin couldn't screw this up. They have had 2 coaches since like my dad was in high school, right? You got Chuck Noll, you got Bill Cowher, and then they said Tomlin's the next guy. He came in, won a Super Bowl, went to more, and has never had a losing season. I think there's that piece of it. I think there's also, and let's not turn this into millennials versus Gen Zers, but the later the generations get, the more it's like, what have you done for me lately? You're a prisoner of the moment. Dynasties do not happen that often in the NFL. So when you sit here and think about like, oh, well, Belichick won 100 Super Bowls because he won 1,000,000 times, and the Cowboys back in the day and the 49ers, I mean, the list of teams that have won more than 4 Super Bowls is very short. The ones that won them in a short period of time is even shorter. I mean, you're talking Cowboys, Packers, Steelers, Cowboys. Like, it doesn't happen that often. Usually there's parity, and you have a bunch of different teams that make it back and back. The Patriots and what the Chiefs are doing now kind of screws up people's mindset because they're thinking, oh, if you're a good coach, you'll just go to 4 straight Super Bowls and win 3 of them. Not true. Not true in almost any other era in NFL history. And when this guy came into the league, you still had like Peyton Manning with the Colts. The Ravens were a juggernaut with Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. You had Brady in New England. I mean, the top heaviness of the AFC was outrageous then. I remember like there's teams that would be like 13-3 and had to go on the road for a wild card game because somebody went 14-2, and there were like 4 teams like that in the AFC. It comes back to like, I don't know what you're looking for from the guy or what you want. Another Super Bowl maybe, but like, how could he be overrated given his body of work and how much he's done with so little in some opportunities?
I mean, just look at John's other favorite team, the Bengals. They couldn't win a playoff game to save their life. But those were still very good teams. Carson Palmer was still an excellent quarterback. Andy Dalton, maybe not, but it's tough to win in this league, man.
So are you 2 done being Steelers fans yet on this?
Oh, come on.
Am I allowed to speak now? Is the Gen Z kid allowed to speak now as Don threw at me? You mentioned to me, not to me, during the show, the later the generation, it's the what have you done for me recently thing. And there's truth to that. And I agree with you in that. But the more important factor here, the big picture factor, is that the NFL is a "what have you done for me lately" league. You could use Russell Wilson as a example. I mean, he was a fantastic quarterback for years. He has 1-2 bad seasons in Denver, and he gets cut, and they just eat his salary. That's neither here nor there. I think we all agree that Russ is kind of washed. Just using him as an example because it kind of applies with the Steelers thing. I'm looking at some of the sources I pulled, and my goal with the sources I pulled was to kind of go, behind enemy lines and look at what some of these writers and fan writers like myself are writing about Mike Tomlin, even up to last season. The first article that came up, he refused to call it the Mike Tomlin era anymore. He called it the Mike Tomlin error. The second article I pulled up is talking about how the Steelers lost to the Cardinals, and the headline is "Blame Mike Tomlin for the Steelers' loss." When the fan base is starting to turn too, there's something to be said there. And I wanted to use that as a point. And I also wanted to use the point real quick before I get back into my little spiel that there was a poll on one of these articles that I, of course, took and said that Mike Tomlin should get fired. That was, yes, he should get fired, basically. No, he should not get fired, or let's see what happens. And 86% of the votes, there was 1,600 respondents, 86% of the votes on a Steelers-focused article, so these are Steelers fans, voted that Tomlin should be fired.
I did mention Steelers fans are delusional, right?
Yes, you did. And I'm with you 100% on certain aspects of that.
Well, how do you square, Noah? Answer this. And I know the body of work is shorter, but if you're a huge Stefanski fan who is a little over 500, and keep in mind, he had some crazy rosters too for a guy that is over 600 winning. I mean, how do you square Stefanski's a better coach than Tomlin?
Well, I think one aspect of that is the shorter body of work right now. I think if you're talking about the, more with less argument that I used, I think last season Stefanski did 10 times what Mike Tomlin could have imaginably done with that Browns roster with 5 different quarterbacks. Tomlin isn't an offensive-minded guy, so to get anything out of a quarterback, he has to rely on his offensive coordinator, and he has had a track history of not picking great ones. They were chanting "Fire Matt Canada" 2-3 weeks into the season last year. I guess the argument is, yes, I understand Mike Tomlin is good and his implications, with the Rooney Rule and all of that. I understand he's good. I think a lot of the times, and maybe this is me projecting onto John a little bit and you, Eric, calling you guys Steelers fans, is, you hear Steelers fans blow up Mike Tomlin to be like this godlike Bill Belichick coach. And I think he's a good coach at the end of the day, but I think he gets blown up to be a fantastic coach. And I think right now he is otherworldly stale. They are a stale football team. Their defense looks like their defense. Their offenses look like their stale ass offense, no matter who's calling those plays. And it might be time for a change. One of you guys mentioned, who would you put in there right now?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, and quick side note, fans are fans. It's short for fanatic. Usually homers are dumb. We're dumb when we're talking about the Browns. I mean, they want to run Ryan Day out of Columbus for losing like 2 games in 4 years. Fan bases.
Noah's one of those guys.
So are you, Eric.
No, I'm a big Ryan Day guy. That is objectively false. Abjectively
I'm not
false.
a fire Ryan Day guy completely. I just need to see a little bit more out of what's going on this year. This is the year that's make or break. We're getting off topic. Back to what you were saying, John.
You could put a poll up that says, is the earth flat or round? And you'll get 15% of people to say something stupid. Like, I get it. People say stuff about Tomlin. Does not make it true. He might be getting stale. That's what coaches do when they hang around for forever. The reason he had the ability to get stale is because he's performed at such a high level for so long that they can't move on. Multiple things can be true at once, but I just don't. I mean, you look, quarterback's the most important position in all of sports, and you look at who he's had at quarterback, and then you equate 10 wins to this guy and tell me he's overrated. I just think it's wild. But let's get into that list because I am anxious to hear if Mike Tomlin got fired tomorrow, who you replace him with, who would do better.
Two names that come to mind. The first one being the guy that's been mentioned a few times already in this, Bill Belichick. He has no job right now.
Talk about a non-offense guy, but go on.
That's fine. He has obviously made things work offensively very well in the past to have as many rings as he does. Which
there's a reason he doesn't have a job, by the way, but keep going.
That's fair. I think he got stale in New England too,
Josh
just because he
McDaniels
got
cough.
stale. What did you say?
It's a Josh McDaniels cough.
The other one that comes to mind is a guy on the Browns coaching staff right now. Mike Vrabel, anybody? You wouldn't take Mike Vrabel if you were a Steelers fan after
Over
what
Tomlin?
he did? I would take him over Tomlin.
No.
I'm taking him over Tomlin.
If I'm going to fire Tomlin, first of all, I want a guy that coaches exciting football. I think Vrabel's a good coach, but it's boring football. So replacing almost a similar philosophy coach, I don't think you're getting better, number one. I mean, I don't know. That's if I had to pick anybody to replace Tomlin, I'd be at a loss of who I'd pick, to be honest with you.
If Andy Reid's not available, I'm keeping Tomlin. And I think before we go too deep into it, saying Tomlin is one of the better coaches of all time and saying he's one of the best 2 or 3 in the NFL today is where we're rating him. And then you're saying he's overrated. And then I'm like, who would you replace him with? And you pull 2 names, one of which is maybe the greatest coach of all time, who's not technically an active coach. I think that's my point. Like if you say, hey, who would you hire who's better? And the first thing you could say is, well, Belichick, and then it gets quiet. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right, but no. So what I thought I was more so answering people that are available right now, right?
If you I mean like blue sky, blank canvas. If you say Mike Tomlin's out, any human being who's alive is on the table.
Oh, well, that changes it because I'm a Tomlin fan, but if anybody right now in the NFL is available,
yep.
I might plug in Kyle Shanahan. I might plug in
both Harbaughs.
No. I would say Belichick. I would say Andy Reid.
Sean McVay.
Maybe Sean McVay, and then that's the end of the list.
McVay over him every day of the week.
I would just go in a polar opposite direction and want a heavily offensive-minded coach, but that's not to say that the results would be better or different. I don't think those coaches we just named gets what Tomlin got out of these teams. I mean, again, when you have a Mason Rudolph at quarterback, what are we even talking about? I mean,
to Noah's point, like all these people were listing, he's like, well, what has he done? And the most with the least, Kyle Shanahan hasn't won shit.
He
keeps getting close and losing.
Well, been there wasn't your argument earlier.
Right. But that's fine too. No, that's fine too. Has he won a Super Bowl with the 49ers? It's slipping my mind right now. Not one yet, right?
No.
Not one. Okay.
Sean McVay won one in one good year and hasn't done a whole hell of a lot before since. Like to blindly say Sean McVay is better than Tomlin, I think is laughable too. But at least it's I guess you could make the argument. But like, if you're saying what have you done for me lately, his is more recent. But like Tomlin's body of work is better than Sean McVay.
That's fine too, but you got to think of what I'm thinking of is the stretch. You know, we're putting Tomlin's been there, 15, 16 years, whatever we said. A lot of these guys haven't even hit a decade there yet. You know, part of my argument too would be, you know, we're comparing Kevin Stefanski to him right now, for example. We've thrown that argument, not as much today, but we have in the past on our own, discussions and whatnot. Stefanski has been a coach in the NFL for 4 years in terms of head coaching. You know, Sean McVay has been less than 10. Shanahan's been less than 10. John Harbaugh. Sorry, guys. John Harbaugh, has been around for a while. I could see the argument against, Harbaugh versus Tomlin. I don't know, man. He doesn't do it for me. He has never, some of the qualms we have with Stefanski, I have with him. I don't see it.
Here's
I've never
the thing,
seen
though.
John Harbaugh has won one playoff game.
Those guys you just named, Shanahan, McVay, I take them over Stefanski. But I do that immediately. Three of those guys were already in Cleveland, but that's a different story. But if Shanahan, Andy Reid, whatever, is your head coach availability, I plug them into Cleveland immediately. In Pittsburgh, I go, I don't know, maybe. I think that tells the whole story. I think the fact that you have to question it, and these are all very good coaches we're talking about. They coach different styles, obviously. The fact that you question it a little bit, where I would plug him right, like a Shanahan, right into Cleveland right now, I think that's all you need to say about Tomlin.
Yeah. And a lot of those things too, like the longevity you talk about is exactly a big piece of my point. Like when you say, hey, we can't judge some of these guys. They haven't been there 10 years. They haven't been there 5 years. I'm like, yes, exactly. Like if you say, not to take it too far down another rabbit hole, but if you're like, who's better, LeBron or Wemby? And I say LeBron, and you're like, well, that's because Wemby doesn't have the time. And I'm like, yes, exactly. So he's not better.
But I agree with you too. And this is the last point, and I think we're all just going to agree to disagree, and maybe we'll pick it up at another time because we're already at 52 minutes, and I want to get into the one last little topic we have. The Steelers themselves are a very old-fashioned organization, very stubborn, stuck in their ways in terms of moving around. And I'm not saying that's completely a bad thing. I mean, they've had success, decades of success for a reason, and I recognize that. But there has been multiple times now, and the two articles that I referenced, earlier when I was giving my spiel, where the fans are calling for the heads, the talking heads of the bigger world, the ESPNs, the Sports Illustrated, what have you, are saying, oh, it might be Tomlin's last little stint here. I think there has to be something that's said about that. You've won 2 Super Bowls in 16 years, and you've made the playoffs. You've made the Super Bowl one other time. I just think there's things to be said about that. I think the be all end all of this argument, though, is I think he's so polarizing as a coach for us to have this conversation, because I'm not the only one who feels the way I do. You both lean that way. I lean this way. It's, the great choosing sides of every debate ever. He's polarizing because he's done a lot of great things, and he's also made, fans and non-fans and haters like ourselves scratch our heads and be like, what is he even doing? What has he got going on? Anything else you guys want to wrap up into the Mike Tomlin thing real quick?
Yeah, just one last note. I think he's polarizing in part, though, because we're talking about one of the most, this really pains me to say, one of the most storied franchises in NFL history. When you're a Browns team, when you're a Steelers team, when you're a Packers team, that expectation is automatically higher. For better or worse, the Browns have not been good in a very long time. We're finally coming into our own. Hopefully that means, marching to a Super Bowl. But regardless, since coming back in 99, that's still been the expectation. It is Super Bowl or bust. Steelers fans are a little bit like Ohio State fans. They've been spoiled. Ohio State hasn't won the Natty in over a decade now, which seems insane, almost a decade. 2016, or 2015, but we're spoiled. We expect to be there every single year because we're talented, because we're one of the most historical and storied programs of all time. I think the same can be said for Pittsburgh. If Mike Tomlin were the head coach with this same record and same body of work in, say, I don't know, Jacksonville or San Diego, I don't even think it's a question. I think he is by far and away considered their best coach of all time and give the man a contract for as long as he wants. But because we're talking Pittsburgh, the level is just so much higher, whether that's fair to him or not.
John?
I'll keep it short and sweet. I hear a lot of people in the NFL, and they all say the same thing. You start listening to the fans, you're going to end up sitting with the fans. There's a reason they run the organization. There's a reason he's been there that long, and it's because he does the job at an elite level. And if they re-up him or he decides not to retire, I believe he'll continue to do it at an elite level until he hangs it up.
I disagree with both of you. I think he is, I'm going to leave it at mildly overrated for his body of work.
Oh, that's a little bit of movement.
Yeah, that's a win.
I don't know if that's a win. I think that's always been my stance. I've just, always come at it hard and pointed at, every little loophole I could find when we're talking not live on, YouTube, X, Facebook.
I think your first statement to me on this whole thing was no coach has ever done less with more. Saying now that he's mildly overrated is a
because he has done. Look at the kid. I'm not getting into this because I want to switch topics. We could do this again another time if we so please. If the media cycle gets so boring. I want to keep this shorter than we, normally go 20, 30 minutes a topic. Just so we can wrap this show up because we're at 56 minutes. Rank the 4 AFC North coaches from worst. So who is the worst coach in the AFC North right now to the best? John, I'm going to let
you. Worst coach, Zach Taylor. I don't think he's a bad coach, but he hasn't won the Super Bowl. He has a lot of talent. We'll see. Awful season last year. He's in the cellar for me. I would put Kevin Stefanski at number 3. Solid head coach. I think he's achieved right at expectations, but he's got to take the next step and win a playoff game deep in the playoffs. We got to start thinking AFC Championship there, but good season last year. Number 2 is John Harbaugh. He could both be underrated and overrated. I kind of come out in 2 different camps on him. He's a great regular season head coach, but in the last 10 years with the MVP at quarterback, he's won 2 playoff games, one of which was just a few months ago. I think he needs to do better with that level of talent. And then I got Mike Tomlin. I just don't see anybody who consistently does as much with as little. I know the fan base doesn't want to give him his due. But of all the coaches in NFL history with that many games coached, Eric, you said 100. Of all the coaches with 200 games, he has the 4th best percentage of all time, and he's 3rd among active coaches. I don't know. Sorry he doesn't do anything great with awful quarterbacks in the last 3 years, but
or with Big Ben, Antonio Brown, Juju as a rookie, Le'Veon Bell, the Killer Bees, losing to Saxonville, who had one good.
All right.
Anyway,
on from this topic.
I mean, he won a Super Bowl. He won a Super Bowl, so you can.
How long ago? You sound like a Steelers fan. Anyway, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't like John's list, you're not going to like mine. I wrote this down. Noah, you sent us the topics a while ago, and I typed up my list, and it mirrors John's exactly. Where I did not struggle at all was putting Zach Taylor last. I think time will tell on him. He's got some talent, but he's got some issues that he needs to work through down there in Cincinnati. And I think if he can work through those issues, we'll see him as a good coach. And we shouldn't take away the fact that he did lead them to a Super Bowl. Again, not an easy feat, a Super Bowl appearance, not a win, obviously. Not an easy thing to do, but he's last for me. Behind him or next up would be Stefanski. I think that Stefanski's a really good coach for us. I'm really excited that both him and Barry are being extended. I'm a fan, but it's kind of like prove it. I need you to show me something. I need you to take this team far. And I need, even if we have less, I need you to do more. Where I struggled a little bit was between Tomlin and Harbaugh. I think Harbaugh is a really good coach as well. It has been a long time, yes. I think that the issues in Baltimore, I don't know, man. Yeah, on paper they're so good, and you look at a guy like Lamar who's MVP and is unbelievable, but they've had injury issues in the past in playoff runs. Again, it's just not an easy thing, but I do think he's still second to Tomlin. I think Tomlin's the top coach in the AFC. I'm hoping that Cleveland can knock him out, but this year's a really good example where we go, okay, it's ours and Baltimore's division to lose, right? The two of us should no problem. And then we're having conversations about Pittsburgh. I think he is a good coach for all the reasons, all the aforementioned reasons. I won't get back into it. But as of now, I would have him in the one spot. Now, if Baltimore goes on to win a Super Bowl next year or win 2 Super Bowls, I think Harbaugh flips and goes ahead of Tomlin for sure. But right now, I think Harbaugh's in second.
So I want to know what you've done for me recently. Number 4, I have Zach Taylor. I don't think he's anything special. I never thought he's anything special. I think he has a extremely talented team in front of him right now. I think he is a subject of that as opposed to the players being a subject of him. So I'm not going to get deep into that because all of the points you guys have made, I agree with. Don't come at me. Number 3.
Oh boy.
Mike Tomlin. Because of the recency, I have Mike Tomlin at number 3. I think Mike Tomlin is a good coach. I have never said that he isn't. However, what has he done recently to bona fide me putting him any higher above the 2 that are obviously going to get mentioned next? You have your fan base, you have your media, you have everyone coming at him, wanting him to leave. And then, we reset and they all love Tomlin again. And then, they start out 2-4 and we hate Tomlin again, like any fan base does. I think Tomlin's good. I think Tomlin's time in Pittsburgh is coming closer and closer to the end. I think that writing is on the wall if they don't turn something around, whether it be with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields this year or next year. That's kind of why I have him at 3. Overall, he would obviously be higher. He's the longest tenured, I believe, out of all 4 coaches right now, right? How long has John been there?
I don't think as long as Tomlin's been in Pittsburgh.
I think it's close.
It's pretty close.
It is close.
Number 2, I have Stefanski right now, solely based off of the body of work through the short time, which is, the 2 Coaches of the Year awards on top of the 2 playoff berths and everything that was the 2023 Cleveland Browns season. I think he is shown to be a fantastic coach because of what he did with, 16 different starting quarterbacks, the second string O-line, Jerome Ford at running back, the same narrative we've talked about for weeks and weeks as Cleveland Browns fans and months. I have him at number 2 right now just because of what's going on and what I've seen out of him in 4 years. And then number 1, I have Harbaugh. The whole situation in Baltimore is interesting. And I think, Eric, you brought this up because, they get hurt. They have a guy like J.K. Dobbins who looks like he could be a perennial, top 10 running back for a period of time very quickly. And then he tears his ACL and then he tears his ACL and then he tears his ACL. And I don't think he's even on a roster this year, let alone a practice squad or, a 90-man, waiver pick right now. I think he's done a lot over there. I think he's done a good job of pivoting and picking up, where he needs to go, moving away from Flacco and moving on to Lamar when they kind of saw what they had with Lamar. I think there's a lot of good that has come out of him. I know what you guys are about to say because, he is one less or whatever. And I agree with you on that. But I think, I'm looking more so at the more recent times, right? And it's hard to put a pin in, where they go wrong. Is it a Lamar problem? Is it an injury problem? Is it a coach? I don't ever think that there's a coaching problem with what's going on in Baltimore as it is, a performance issue or an injury issue or something like that. And I think you two would probably agree with me on that, but maybe I'm trying to save myself from being crucified right now.
I gotta say, I'm flabbergasted because every point that you gave for Stefanski and every point that you gave for Harbaugh right now was everything you said against Mike Tomlin. You said that Stefanski has made the playoffs. Well, whoop-de-doo. He made the playoffs and lost in the first round. You said that that Harbaugh has had injuries and it's not his fault what's going on with single point you made was the opposite points that you made for Tomlin.
John, I'm gonna let you dig into me real quick too.
No, I was gonna say the same thing, man. Eric took the words out of my mouth. I just don't. It just doesn't add up because it's like, well, if we're talking short time, it's this, but if you're talking long time, it's this, and we'll just flip it for Tomlin. I think the good news is that I don't think we're going to have to wonder for long. I think we're going to shut this argument down here in the next year or two, because I think with Russ Wilson and Justin Fields, if Tomlin sticks around for another couple of years, he will remind everyone how good he is. And it pains me to say that, but this is the nastiest division in the NFL. And I got the Steelers winning like 12 or 13 games next season, so we can get into that another time. But like, he'll remind you of why we're saying all these things, and that, you know, when you give him somebody better than Mason Rudolph, he can do some pretty cool shit.
I hope you're so wrong.
I hope so too.
I know you're so wrong. I'm still going to stick by my points for one sole reason, is it is the now versus the body of work. I have never, you know, I'm not trying to discredit Mike Tomlin when I call him overrated. I, again, think it is a issue of the fan base and what have you done for me lately? And in terms of what have you done lately, not much. If we compare it to Harbaugh, in my opinion, I think he's even done more than Tomlin lately. They've won a playoff game here and there, at least. I don't even remember the last time the Steelers have won a playoff game. It was before 2020. On top of the fact, too, that I lost my point real quick. Regardless, what's going on with Harbaugh and them, it's a different machine to me. It's the now versus then. I just think I could see Tomlin leaving the Steelers sooner rather than later. And maybe he does go somewhere in the NFC or somewhere else in the AFC and picks up a job that, you know, and he shows me that I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. But right now, I haven't seen enough out of him to be like he is this god tier coach that people make him out to be.
We're going to have to keep our eyes on Harbaugh because, like, the Tomlin debate aside, and thinking about the fact that the NFL is what have you done for me lately, and getting less out of a roster with more. The Baltimore Ravens team with the MVP at quarterback is not assembled to win the division and bow out gracefully in the AFC Championship. They got to win a Super Bowl. And I think when you think about expectations, Harbaugh, again, two things can be right at the same time. Harbaugh can be an excellent coach and be not meeting expectations. And I think he's in that weird zone of like, a lot of teams out there would love to have a guy who's going to come in and instantly turn your roster into a 12-win machine. But, like, if you're in Baltimore and you're thinking about the window with Lamar, his seat might be getting hot if he doesn't put something together this season.
That's an interesting take. And talking about interesting takes, because we're coming up on an hour and 10, what are our final thoughts and takes, hot takes of the week? Eric, you requested we do this no matter what. I'm giving it to you. What is your hot take, man?
Yeah, so this is a hot take and probably a not so popular take here in Cleveland, but I'm really glad that you're wearing that Women's Final Four shirt, Noah, because it illustrates my point. Check out that Final Four logo. I don't know if many people realize this because it is a fairly subtle version of it, but that is a guitar pick. And I am so tired. Here's my hot take. I am so tired of Cleveland being everything rock and roll city. We have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but this is not rock and roll town. Not anymore. Not for a long time. The All-Star game did it for the Guardians. When they held the All-Star game, the logo was a guitar. It's a pick for the women's Final Four. Can't we find something else in Cleveland to make logos based on? First of all, it took someone else pointing it out that it was a guitar pick. I didn't even realize that.
I didn't until you just said that, and I bought the t-shirt.
I'm so sick of the rock and roll theme. If we bring back a WNBA team, which I am all for, I'm actually going to watch the WNBA draft next Monday because I think that women's sports, there needs to be some more follow through. Let's not name them the Rockers again. I mean, there's better stuff, guys, and I'm tired of it.
I'm going to pivot because I've changed my hot take based off of what you said. Okay. Maybe I'm just feeling very combative today after our topics and what we've discussed. My hot take is that if we do get a WNBA team back, it should be named the Rockers because that's what their name was originally. However, I do agree with you that we need to cut the crap with all the rock and roll theme branding. I would have probably not bought this t-shirt if I realized that was a guitar pick sooner because that's how against it I am.
So you agree.
When the Guardians come out with their City Connects next month, I swear to God, if it is rock and roll themed, I'm not buying it. If they do anything else, Forest City, the River on Fire, the Cleveland Browns baseball edition, even, which makes no sense. The Cleveland baseball team. Let's go to the Washington, whatever. I'll buy it.
By the way, I do think that Cleveland should have a WNBA team, but maybe we don't. I like historical things, but maybe we don't name them the same team that got run out of town, really because of LeBron James.
That's a fair take too, but obviously women's sports have picked up in popularity a bunch. John, what's your take of the night?
Yeah, it's this is interesting. I'm gonna, a little spice. I'm gonna disagree with both of you. I don't absolutely love the rock thing, but we kind of own it. And there was the Cleveland Rock song and the Drew Carey show. There's a million things that go into this, but cities have identities. And if you don't have a megalopolis like LA and New York, you kind of get one thing, right? You go to Baltimore, you hear about crab cakes. You go to Cincinnati, you hear about chili. You go to Cleveland, you hear about the Rock Hall. It's hard to make a logo for the Final Four with like reasonable cost of living, friendly people, and a great place to raise a family. Like, I love Cleveland, but like, what else are we going to put on there, right? The Sherwin-Williams building? Like,
Forest City, baby.
Man.
I have been a proponent of the Forest City nickname becoming a bigger part of our branding for so long.
What is the Forest City nickname?
Our nickname is the Forest City. Forest City Shuffleboard. Yeah.
I thought you said Forest City.
No,
I was like, Akron, Canton, Cleveland, Elyria does not make a good Final Four team either.
No.
I mean, to your point, though, John, you brought up chili in Cincinnati, and I don't see them making logos with buckets of chili. I mean, come on, can't we be a little more creative here?
I have a branded Skyline chili can from an event I went to in Cincinnati because the whole Cincinnati team was so pumped about the chili. And if they get a Final Four, I bet it's in there. No, my spicy take isn't too spicy, but it's a little early, and it's way, 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 way out there in terms of too soon. I think the Cleveland Guardians are going to win about 95 games, win the division, and make noise in the playoffs. I don't know if that's wild, but I think there's a couple things that I really like. The biggest being the offense and the bats coming around. I think they're going to figure out some platoon, outfield, rotational stuff. And I think even though my heart like literally sank when I heard the news about Bieber, I think we pitch well enough even without him to smoke some of the teams like the Twins and the Tigers. And I think it's going to be a hell of a year, and Vogt's going to win Manager of the Year.
They're hitting the baseball.
Quick question. I don't know if either of you paid attention to the game tonight. John, did you pay attention to the game tonight?
I watched until it was 5-5, and then I had kid taxi service and a few things to do, but I saw a good portion of it.
Okay, I wondered if you were still standing by that thought process with, the whole, what was it, Allen tonight? Allen threw five in the first, yeah. But I agree with you. I think our pitching's fantastic. He can have an off night. That's perfectly fine.
You guys are nuts.
It happens. I've seen Verlander get knocked out of games in the first inning before in his it's 101-62.
I love the Guardians hitting. I think they could make a push to win the Central. My most exciting thing about the Guardians this year are the new blue seats. I think those blue seats look amazing. I'm really disappointed they didn't do the whole stadium. Like, how cheap are we? We couldn't do it all in one go. But the blue looks nice.
Yeah.
My friend worked for the construction company putting in the blue seats. They literally had to bring them in sets of 3. So they have a flatbed, and it was just laid out in sets of 3, and that's part of the reason they couldn't get even the whole lower bowl
You had
done.
all winter. You're telling me
yeah,
you couldn't hire 5 more flatbeds?
Yeah.
I'm with you on that, but I guess that might be a cheap Dolan thing. That's neither here nor there.
100%.
Listen, we are at an hour and 15 minutes, almost an hour and 16. I'm sorry to both of you. We could talk all night, I swear. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in and watching the East Bank Sports Show at the Office Edition. Don't forget to hit a download. If you haven't hit download, it helps us out a bunch. Hit subscribe on all of our socials. Follow us. Shout out to Eric and John. Their Twitters are listed on the screen if you're watching on the screen. So is mine. Give us all a follow. Check out our takes in the meantime. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in to another episode of the East Bank Sports Show. Everybody have a great night, day.
Night, guys.